So I was just holding left click, right? And obviously they're core 7, so it's a bit faster, but I was kind of taking it easy. Rapi is currently doing 552 right now, and this is a 3 mg team, but technically if we replace Rapi with Little Mermaid, then it will be just a 2 mg team. Doesn't have any much other attack source other than Crown, but then Crown would buff Little Mermaid a little bit more. So if we look at it and then give Little Mermaid 100% elemental, let's go 70% elemental plus 20% from cube plus 10% from the default, so basically plus 100% elemental. She would do times 2, so Little Mermaid would do, not counting, or maybe counting Crown's buff, it'll be like 1 bill, maybe between 1 bill to 1.5 bill, at least for me, if it is similar investments as like my Rapi. With that in mind, then yeah, I would do the fight a lot faster, and that's with 2 mg. So that's how she would affect this Kraken team, because at the very least, like based on just a rough paper math calculation, this is just I just counted during full burst or anything, but I didn't count like self attack buffs, overloads, and other attack buffs. Rapi only kind of did 53, right? Like this is just the default, but then Siren was doing 55 with 2 mg, and again, I didn't count a lot of the other things there, right? I didn't count the attack damage, caster's attack that Rapi's providing, but Siren, if you compare it with here, she has a damage taken, doesn't have a caster's attack for the team though, but then there's the attack damage. So take that as how you may in terms of the buff difference. But then Siren also has a self-attack buff for herself that they didn't count. But at the very least, like if we're just looking, so what I calculated here is I multiplied just the basic attack, weapon attack multiplier, how much bullets per second, and then like the skill 2 from Rapi, and then same with Little Mermaid, the basic attack, and then her skill 2. It's gonna come out that Siren and Rapi are basically closely similar in terms of like B1 damage. Now, however much Siren is buffing, that's gonna be a different factor. It's gonna affect different setups very differently depending on what buffs are available. Safe to say that I think Sirens / Little Mermaid's DPS is gonna be roughly similar, or at least that what we can expect is probably Rapi's DPS level. So even though like her damage numbers are kind of on the lower end, it is a little bit more closer to she is like a DPS B1. Now there are other things that Little Mermaid is trying to provide, right? She is a wind advantage, so there's that. Very pretty much like gonna replace volume at this rate. She's a supporter, so her base attack is 80%, roughly 80% of an attacker. Like her potential is a little bit more on the lower end. However, it kind of makes up for it because she has higher multipliers, because thanks to her like skill 2. But the skill 2 has a little bit of conditional thing about us, and that is it's something about consuming ammos. And let's start talking about it a little bit. First things first is her basic attack is equal to like just the standard SMG. There are some units that are at 10.12%. In particular, Epinel is one of them. But roughly standard MG is like 8 to 10% SMG. That is 8 to 10% attack damage, but they're shooting at 20 bullets per second. The skill 1 though, let's try to break it down a little bit, and we have seen this already in the JP. So the focusing status and focuses fire, in case you're just kind of wondering in it, and how I kind of just understood it also, is this is just them trying to define what we are doing already. It's a mechanic in Nikke already. So focusing is like when we're trying to shoot and aim. That's how I have understood this, and that's how it would likely be as well. So this is in the shooting position, so this is likely the focusing status when she's aiming. That's where the unit, and focus fire is when we're in full burst and every unit is following where we're shooting. So that's kind of how we understood it. Next is the full burst cooldown reduction. This is similar to Rapi Red Hood 7.48. That is something that we kind of have identified as well already, that she was doing 7 seconds of cooldown. I would assume that this would be scaling, so it would start at 5 seconds, scaling upwards to 7.48. So it is very highly likely that skill 1 is a high priority just because of the cooldown burst, and likely because of how we want to achieve some certain things that I will tell in a few. Attack damage, so there's entering full burst affects allies, there's attack damage 4%, but again, this might seem like a piss ass number, but when you think about it, maybe what if they start releasing like a damage taken increase burst to on burst damage instead, right? So, and maybe it might start opening, there's maybe some more DPSs that are attack damage related, and maybe the burst to attack buffers instead are gonna be worth more, because this time around she is not providing any attack boost instead. So that's something to consider. It's just a different kind of team building that might end up working out with her. So the next one is the activates each time total ammo is consumed by allies, which reaches 400. And this is the first part that really indicates us why does she want machine guns. It's total ammo consumed by allies, which is 400, and so you have to fill the burst gauge. It gives like a huge fill in burst gauge. We actually have seen it in the... So we have seen this fill burst gauge increase like immediately around this part in the video, in the Nikke EN video. You'll take a look at here on the burst, see how immediately it will increase right there. There's like a huge jump in the burst gauge. So that's what like that filled burst gauge there. So when there's like a lot of ammo consumed, which likely is for machine guns, then you will get that burst gauge increase. Now we did some calculation in it. How do you get this? Because that will be a 1 burst gauge likely, right? So if we want to reach this cooldown reduction 7.48, if you think about it, so 20 seconds of cooldown minus 7.48, so there's 12.52 seconds minus 10 because of the duration of full burst. You have 2.52 seconds so that you can catch this cooldown reduction. So your goal is for 400 within 2.5 seconds, you want to reach the consumption of 400 ammo. But with that means that for each second, you should be shooting around 160 bullets per second, which is achievable if you actually do 1 machine gun plus another machine gun plus at least 2 more submachine guns. So that will get you enough. So I would say the minimum team combination would be at least like 2 submachine guns and 2 machine guns if you want to reach this cooldown reduction. Now there's different other combinations that you can do. The more machine guns the better, because at the very least like you're trying to make sure that you can reach that 400 at least within that cooldown reduction duration. So at least 2 MGs is like the preferred with siren, so that you're not like taking too long on the burst in gap in between. So that's what skill 1 is. Skill 2, moving on to that, is it gives like damage taken increase. So that's like the debuff that we saw on their live stream, and then after 50 normal attacks you will do that bubble status. So I don't think this stacks, so it should be just straightforward that it's like 5.05%. and again, it might seem like it's low, but that's because it's just a different multiplier. There's just a lot of other factors in. One thing is like no other units are likely gonna be giving this multiplier if she is in there. So that's one thing that to keep in mind. It might seem low, well, it is. There are some people that were saying like affects when the enemy appears, affects the target is this, and then there's a stun for 3 seconds. And I swear to God, whenever you guys see the word stun, you're like, is this good for PvP? Is this good for PvP? This likely isn't gonna be for PvP because yes, it says enemy appears and affect the target. The target is usually the boss or the main objective of what you need to kill to clear the stage. So likely it's not gonna be for PvP. Again, people are thinking about it, but probably not. And even then, even if it's for PvP, what that means is let's just assume, I will entertain you guys that saying, oh, it's gonna be used for PvP. With 30 FPS, SMG are shooting 15 bullets per second instead of 20. And so you are doing, in order before that, it would take 3.3 seconds before you would be able to land that stun. So it might be effective on like slower teams, but again, what are the chances that it's gonna be available for PvP? Who knows? The next part is what is probably kind of got away from people's minds. This one is her offensive capabilities, and that people didn't really anticipate that because people were just like, oh, they were focused a little bit on her support, and with rightly so. We did initially think that the support is, oh, she's gonna be support, but then they didn't really think about that, well, she's gonna be support and hit hard. So this is where I kind of did a little bit of some calculation. There's the first part that only activates every 1 second, and it triggers attack sequentially 4 times. In case you guys didn't know, this attack sequentially is, it triggers 4 times. Cinderella has it already. So this is 63.36 multiplied by 4, and every second, so you multiply that by 10 in a full burst, and that will hit the enemy. And then the next one is the consumed by allies. Total ammo consumed by allies, which is 500, and this affects random enemy units, but you know, if there's only one, then it will just hit one. Attack sequentially, in case you guys didn't know, so for example, this attacks sequentially for 4 times. If there's 3 enemies, it would hit 3 different enemies. It would hit enemy 1, 2, 3, and then after that it will go back to the first one that it hits. So it's kind of random, but not exactly random. And so this one seems like, oh, it's 85% times 10, and so that's like 850%, but then it does need this 500 bullets thing, and I did some extra calculation. Basically what you're trying to get out of it, it depends on how many machine guns you have, and I just calculated if you have machine gun but then not I'm counting also the SMG. I'm just counting herself as the SMG, but then the other one, let's say sniper rifle or rocket launcher, so I'm not kind of counting them already, but basically that's how frequent they will trigger. This 85% multiplied by 10, and then how often it triggers. Basically it's the DPS or attack percent per second is like 238%, 340 if it's 3, and then 442 if it's 4. So it actually, the more MGs that you have, the stronger she becomes at the very least. So this will actually be pretty decent damage. And as again, this is like a rough paper math. I just wrote it down. The damage during full burst, I didn't count the one where it's not full burst, but I could have done that. But Paskai didn't put this thing again and started writing in Notepad, so just blame Paskai about this instead of writing it in the Excel sheet, Google Sheets, but who cares, right? I kind of gave like some simulation. Rapi just ends up having like that 535% multiplied. I counted the attack and then the attachment from skill 2 and then the explosion from skill 2. How much does it cost in a per second basis, attack percent per second basis? So it would end up being at 53.5k DPS. And then siren, you know, depend if she has 2 mg, 3 mg, 4 mg. As you can see, the DPS increases the more there is machine guns. So as you can see here, she actually does even out, and I did not count like whatever other self-attack buffs, overloads, and other attack buffs. But if you do add the attack buffs, likely Siren would be better than Rapi, so she would end up doing more damage in a neutral form because of just better multipliers, right? She just have better multipliers, so even though she has lower base attack, kind of just makes up with it because of the just higher multipliers. And say, like for example, if you're using Crown as a buffer, Crown will give a flat attack, because based on the caster's attack, it would give a flat attack additive to Rapi and then flat attack additive to Siren. And what will actually happen is Siren would benefit more to it rather than Rapi. But again, I didn't. There's other things that I did consider and other buffs, but this is just to give an idea that Siren seems like, you know, at the very least, like based on these numbers, seems like she will do. At the very least, you can expect at least Rapi's DPS as a B1. Now, whether her buffs are gonna be better or worse, that's gonna depend on the team, right? There's gonna be a lot of different factors in it, because these are different multipliers. But what if there's a good burst to attack buffs instead? Because she is not providing any attack buffs here. That's something to take into consideration. And maybe if a damage taken increase buffer instead, or debuffer instead on the burst 2 with a little bit of attack buff, maybe that's something also. Who knows how it will end up, because again, how this will affect is gonna vary from team to team. But I would probably say it could be roughly similar to Rapi, because one thing that Rapi is caster's attack, but then keep in mind that attack is a fairly diluted in terms of self DPS, because our other DPSs, for example, let's say Scarlet Back Shadow, she gets 100% attack already on her own, so it's not as meaningful as probably, you know, the damage taken plus combination of attack damage maybe. So that's something to consider. It might end up being better or worse depending on the team composition, but again, roughly similar performance from how it seems like with Rapi. The main thing, again, that I do think that this has an advantage of is the fill burst gauge. And I kind of want to expand on this a little bit. This is a little bit of newer player friendly, I would say. Not necessarily newer player friendly, but casual player friendly, because before then, and this is how I also kind of think what's happening, why they give kind of these numbers. For a top player, this burst skill cooldown reduction, this cooldown is something that we can reach even without necessarily like this full burst gauge. A lot of the people are, for example, as the full burst is ending, we have another sniper rifle or rocket launcher that we are prepping to full charge, and then by the time full burst ends, we do a full charge release so that it gains a lot of energy and then fast charge it. So that is like one example that what we kind of do in order to maximize like the energy gain, and we are able to reach that. But for a kind of just a casual player or not a try hard, this is something that might actually help them a little bit better, because at least, hey, you just hold your left click. Even with that, there is a downside to it, and there's a pro and con to it. One is machine gun reliance. Not everybody has a really good PC, and another thing is not everybody is playing on PC. And this is, I feel like I did comment it a little bit also, and I feel like Shift Up is somewhat they are testing on PC, and I feel like they're not really considering like lower end graphics players until they fix the FPS issue. This issue will constantly happen, where if you are in 30 FPS, the machine guns are gonna shoot half speed, right? So you're actually, whatever calculation I did here, her effectiveness is actually gonna be lower in phones. if you have crappy PC. This is something that, because I was just calculating this in terms of 60 FPS. So that is just something that you guys need to be aware of, and unfortunately it is what it is. And I do feel like I don't know, it feels like they're not aware of it at all, that FPS is an important, like it actually affects like gameplay and damage. It actually heavily affects gameplay. Do you guys not have phones? Yeah, and I feel like they're constantly releasing these, but then I don't know, maybe this patch will fix whatever the MG issue is, right? Because one other way that they could do it, like for example, is to extrapolate kind of how things are. So if it's like 30 FPS, let's just say, it would shoot 60 bullets instead of 30 bullets within that 1 second, because if it's 30 FPS, but it kind of just scales it, right? So, but then they're not doing it in Nikke, because it's very FPS intensive. Yeah, you have 144 FPS, but the game is capped at 60 though. But hey, if you are shooting at 144 FPS and your machine guns are also shooting at that rate, Monka TOS, let's get him, shift up, get that guy. He's actually doing more damage. He's hacking. Going back at this, there's pros and cons, right? For worse PC, it is kind of worse. If you have good PC, then it's actually pretty good. And feels like it will allow it to be a little bit more, the gap between at least like the one who are mechanically better, like Kira or whoever the top one is, and the normal player is at least like shortened, at the very least from how I see this. Now obviously there are still some things that probably the top players are gonna do that are different from like a normal player, but still, even at the very least in terms of like energy gain matter. And this is something that I have been noticing them a lot more, and they have been doing this a lot more also. Like Helm, for example, is giving like faster charge. Mana is, even though she's assault rifle, there's like energy boost whenever she bursts. So they are slowly trying to make it, at the very least, like shorten the gap for a top player or like top like min-maxers, and then the more casual players, the damage is like getting shorter and shorter, mainly because this full burst is actually very impactful. That's something that people need to account for. Doing a full burst for 14 times versus doing a full burst for 13 times is actually a huge damage difference that can matter and make a lot of difference. But yeah, I mean, and the burst, I didn't really kind of talk about it, but I think one thing that I want to touch upon on this burst is, other than the attack damage, or just 10%, ooh. And then this one is the odd one. She is buffing herself but not allies, and yeah, it is what it is. But I think the one thing that I want to talk about is this 33% magazine. And I actually think that if you have like very high roll of ammos, maybe if you have like 4 backlines or something, you could essentially effectively with machine guns do infinite ammo, because within like that 3 minutes of a fight, there is basically an effectively infinite ammo. And maybe if there's like slow cooldown, maybe at most like one reload if you have like high ammo still, but not like max rerolls on it. But it is possible to just have the machine gun to continuously shoot with it because of this reload, and that's something that is gonna be team building wise for Siren, is how many machine guns are gonna be there in terms of team building. That's gonna be a huge factor in terms of this. And what Siren would allow is, at the very least, like, she would replace volume, but not that we are going to replace her in the volume team, but more that we can put Siren in grave team or in crown team, and then move the burst around. So let's say that Rapi Red Hood is on Crown team, and then Litter is on Grave team last solar raid, let's say, and then Volume was on Crown or on the Maid's team. Then what you can do is you could put Siren, Little Mermaid on Crown team or Grave team, and then Rapi Red Hood as B1 next on the Grave team, and then you can move Litter instead on the Maid's duo team. So that will kind of just propagate on it, and it can essentially effectively replace Volume. And very likely so, you should replace Volume at this point. If you guys haven't really invested much on Volume, I think she will be the one that's going to be replaced here. But again, I guess it also depends on the boss. Let's start off with that also, because maybe we might not use Stove instead, or now Shotgun, then maybe Volume might get a resurgence again. But at the very least though, we're likely going to be replacing Dorothy. Whoever has been using Dorothy still kinda will, at this point, you should be replacing her now, because the burst one, we have Rouge, we have yeah, we have Rouge, we have Rapi Red Hood, we have Litter, we have Volume, and then now we have Little Mermaid there. So there's like no spot for Dorothy if you were even remotely using her. Dorothy favorite item, what the hell? Yeah, yeah, unfortunately. But so that's one possible thing, and people might start like resetting her. There's one thing okay, sure, fine. One thing that Dorothy is, if they are going to continue this trend where they're gonna put distributed damage to be worth it on the, if they're gonna keep making distributed damage on water raids, then maybe Dorothy will keep her relevance. But I'm just saying, you know, one of the issues with Dorothy is because you have to tie her with another cooldown reduction or privity for ammo reduction, right? So I mean, you can do without her, but her cooldown, her burst effectiveness is kind of not gonna be there. But we are likely still going to be using Litter. We're still likely going to be using Rapi Red Hood. And in situations for Iron advantage and Fire advantage, Rapi Red Hood will be the DPS instead. And we will end up like using, maybe still use Volume at that situation, or D-Killer Wife. Overall, it seems like her number are kind of bad, but there are other quality of life things. The field burst gauge and the focus fire is one thing that I would say her main emphasis on, but also that will also mean that her team building is going to be heavily machine gun based. And at the very least, if you want to take advantage of her also being a pretty good burst 1 DPS with some supports in it, then you will likely want her to be with other machine guns. And I mean, good thing, hey, at the very least, we do have a lot of machine guns to use. So at the very least, there's that. You have Ludmilla, you have Modernia, you have Ray, Rapi Red Hood, you have Asuka, and then Mihara is coming in. Let's not talk about Neon. Let's yeah, so what are your guys' thoughts on this? Initially, it was a knee-jerk reaction that we did kind of just like, what the hell are these numbers? But then if you actually like take a closer look in terms of her DPS, it seems like she will be I mean, we thought that she was gonna be more of a support, but then you look at the support amounts, you're like, what is this? And also the team building, as it seems like she's pretty much like a machine gun team building right here. I don't see any other team building, and at the very least, like, you're doing her a disservice if you're not making her with a machine gun team comp at the very least. For the builds, so here's the thing. Yeah, so initially I thought about it, if we're just gonna use her as support, then we're just gonna upgrade skill 1 and we don't need to upgrade skill 2 and burst. But now that we're taking a closer look in this, and now we're gonna consider her as a DPS rather than a support, now you're gonna be upgrading skill 2 and possibly burst also. Don't you love shift up? Oh boy. Yeah, well, here's the thing though. At the very least, okay, pull at least one copy of her. Don't regret it like you did on Rouge. There are a lot of people that didn't decide to pull on Rouge and started regretting it. Because another thing is, Shift Up tends to do this also, like release the supports before the DPS. Maybe there's other support DPSs that are gonna be working out with her. Now here's one thing that I could at least tell you guys. We are getting free pulls, right? Free pulls, daily pulls. So try your luck for 21 days, pull on her banner, try to see if you get her. Maybe you might end up like needing her immediately to install raid, but you can delay on it as much as possible as you do. And she is gonna be usable even as just a support as a B1, right? This cooldown burst and the full burst gauge, I think, in terms of the team building, if you're gonna start copying whatever the top players are gonna be using, you're likely gonna see her being used as well, especially with how many machine guns are there in fire and the boss is likely weak to fire. You want to just kind of use it. I do think that at the very least the skill 1 will put her support capability to max, so 1044 is something that will allow her to just perform as a support 1044. And then if you want her to do more damage as how she is, kind of like Rapi Red Hood, you're gonna have to start investing in skill 2 and burst skill also. Now the burst skill, it's both support and DPS, right? I mean all of them are both support and DPS, but more so like as a DPS on skill 2. And the burst is, well, if you have the resources, I mean, I would go with it, right? Just upgrade it. But if you don't, then I would probably go with upgrading the DPSs first. If you don't have the DPSs maxed out on their burst first, then I would prioritize them over her own burst, just mainly because well, the values seem low. Maybe the scaling would be the reloads magazine more, but I think it's fine to kind of take it slowly on the burst. That's my take, but we will test it once it's out. We will see kind of the scaling of it once she's out. And as usual, whenever she comes out, we'll do some testing on it. So make sure you're following the channel already on Twitch and also subscribe on YouTube. But yeah, anyways, that's about it. It's 7 a.m. now. Oh, Jesus. Oh, okay. I was gonna sleep earlier, but yeah. All right, just say bye. I'll see you guys next time.